The U.S. Army is embarking on the largest modernization effort in over 40 years to confront the pacing threat from China. The Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology oversees the Army's acquisition enterprise. Young Bang is the Principal Deputy to the Assistant Secretary. Young, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
So it's no secret that Army acquisition takes too long, and you know it's been a problem for a while. What progress has been made? What changes are you planning to make?
That's a great question, and everyone knows that the acquisition process has taken a long time. I remember when I was in the Army years ago, acquisition to get a new weapons platform would take 15, 20 years. And Congress has actually given us a little bit more authority to help accelerate the acquisition timelines. And if you look at some of the authorities like the MTA, mid-tier acquisitions, or the software pathways, it allows us to expedite the way that and the speed in which we do acquisitions. And so if you look at some of the things, we have been actually working to accelerate the whole acquisition timeline, and we've actually looked to implement a lot of changes in those ways. We've been working with the OSD, Department of Secretary of Defense, on some of the software pathways. We have 8 programs in the software pathway, and we have several programs in the mid-tier acquisitions, and that allows us, like I said, to accelerate. And some of the impacts that we've seen is that we're looking on target to field 24 new capabilities by the year 23. And so if you put that in context, like I said, 15 to 20 years when I was in, to now what we're doing, and we're fielding things in about 4 or 5 years, is incredible. And we have great partners in the Army to do that. Army Futures Command is one of them. And then we have great partners in OSD that's helping us work through these new processes with these new acquisition authorities.
Well, let's talk about those modernization plans, because you don't have unlimited funds, obviously. What are your highest priorities?
The highest priority is absolutely what the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of the Army has really laid out. Secretary of the Army has laid out the 6 modernization priorities for her. And some of those things that we're working on are things like long-range precision fires. You talked about China being the pacing threat. We have critical needs around long-range precision fires, and we're working on those. We have a PEO down in Huntsville that's working on hypersonics. We're working on these type of long-range precision fires. PRISM and some of those other efforts are some of the efforts they're working on right now.
The Secretary of the Army recently announced that modernization and the science and technology enterprise would fall under your office, not Army Futures Command. Can you clarify what that announcement was?
Sure. It's actually just, like you said, it was actually clarifying. There was a little bit of ambiguity in there, so it was really clarifying the roles of Army Futures Command. Army Futures Command is really working on the requirements and the future concepts, and we work from the ASALT perspective on all the S&T as well as all the acquisition programs. So the programs that we talked about, we work hand in hand with Army Futures Command. So if you think about the cross-functional teams, we work hand in hand with AFC. Again, as they refine requirements and future concepts, then we work with them to do the acquisitions and the development.
The U.S. is sending a lot of weapons to Ukraine. Does the industrial base have the ability to reconstitute and replenish those stocks?
Great question. There is a great amount of effort that we're working with the current industrial base now to really accelerate the scale in which we're actually doing the replenishment of the stock. So things that are in the news these days, Javelin, absolutely, we have the scale, we have the capacity, and our partners from industry are actually accelerating the pace to do that. There are some things that are, a little bit longer lead time, like the Stingers, for example. I remember I trained on those in the 80s, right? So if you think about that, there are some parts that are a little bit obsolete. And so we're working with the manufacturers and the industrial base to really accelerate how do we actually develop new parts for those obsolete parts. Sorry, redundant there. But really, some of those long lead times take a little bit longer. And so, the acquisition community and the government, we're looking at potentially ways to accelerate the purchase of some of those long lead time items, as well as different designs to compensate for the long lead time items. But all in all, our partners in the industrial base have been really great partners to work and accelerate the replenishment of some of the stocks that are going over to Ukraine.
Young, another big problem in DOD and in the Army is recruiting, and recruiting a high-tech workforce. How are you doing on that? How are you doing on diversity?
That's a great question. If you think about the modernization efforts, all of those are actually underpinned by digital transformation. All of your components, not just the software, but all the components in the big weapon systems have a software component to it. And so because of that, we do need a digital literate workforce. And we're working on programs to upskill some of our workforce. We're working on new authorities to let people come from industry into the workforce and vice versa. But really, it's got to be a team effort where we work in the government side with industry to really help our needs. And we're open to small business, large businesses, non-traditionals to help us think about the problems differently, again, to upskill. But again, the other context, like me, I came from industry. We need more people in government that have that industry background, that understand digital transformation to help, again, accelerate the Army modernization process.
Just really quickly as we wrap up, I want to know a little bit about your personal history. I know that you came from South Korea, you were born there, you came at the age of 5. Why West Point? Why would you go there?
So that's a great question. I grew up in Baltimore, so the question I always get, how come West Point and not Naval Academy? And Naval Academy is a great school, but I lived within the 30-mile radius, so my parents would have expected me home every weekend. And so I was like, oh, I got to get out of my backyard. So I went to West Point. But, you know, West Point is a storied institution. Actually, after the Korean War, the U.S. government set up the Korean Military Academy. And up until, like, the 90s, the past presidents have all graduated from the Korean Military Academy. So a lot of Korean immigrants, they only know 2 colleges, right? It's Harvard and West Point because of that history. And of course, being able to give back to my country that's provided me so much opportunity is just, you know, a dream come true.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.